My background, I grew up in the UK, in the north of England, which at the time was fairly male chauvinist, to say the least. I have 6 brothers, and we moved to West Africa when I was 15 years of age, spent 8 years in West Africa. So I had an interesting start as far as experiencing bullying and experiencing the drivers behind people trying to dominate you, why they try and dominate you, and what they're hoping to achieve. It's very interesting to compare that. And since then, I've gone on to have my own children in Australia and see them go through school. So reflecting on all of that I've drawn a lot of that information.
As a parent, when your child mentions that, little Johnny or little Kathy might be hassling them at school, your heart really goes out to them, doesn't it? Because it's about developing those skills that is necessary to speak back and hold your ground, and that's something that you can only learn through life experience, really, isn't it?
Yes, you can only learn through life experience, but you also can learn to look at it in a different way. One of the things I'm hoping to achieve with the book is to demonstrate how many people are bullied, how often it occurs, and that it's very easy to shift your perception from one of being a victim to one of seeing it as an opportunity.
All right, so tell me about that. How do you do that?
How you would do that, firstly, is through the conscious use of language. So being very careful what you say about yourself to your children, what you say about yourself to yourself, and what you say about your children to themselves. So, for example, if you say to your child, you need to toughen up and you need to get through this exam and get through this hard moment in time, or you're going to be a failure, you are installing in your child the idea that they can be a failure that may not have occurred to them at that point in time.
That's so true.
So the awareness of your language, or if you're standing and you drop something, so I'm hopeless, I'm pathetic, something that you may have heard said about you as a child, then you are reinstalling the idea that people can be hopeless and pathetic. And it's difficult to feel empowered if you're surrounded by that kind of thinking.
So it's very much a mindfulness approach that you're taking.
Yes, very mindful of communication and mindful of behaviour.
How would you define bullying?
Bullying is the continued, determined approach of another to cause you pain or suffering in some way, whether it be psychological or emotional or physical. But it's a determined effort. Someone putting you down once or giving you a hard time, or I wouldn't consider bullying. I would consider it abusive. But bullying is when it recurs. That's when it becomes a bigger problem.
Let's talk about the perpetrator and the victim.
Yes.
Do you use the word victim? It has negative connotations for me.
It does.
The person being bullied.
Yes, it's difficult to address it. People see themselves as victims. I like to address that as a topic. How do you see yourself? The person experiencing the bullying, yes, would be better, and the person bullying. My understanding is they're both exactly the same. They're both people who come from a pain point. They both come from insecurity, lack of confidence, lack of self-belief. One person will externalize that as a problem and project it onto another, either physically, mentally, or emotionally. The other person will internalize it, believe it at a deep level, and pull themselves inwards and suffer.
So they're the perfect pair, if you like.
They're the perfect pair. They attract each other, they are attracted to each other, and they play out a game together. And my goal is to interrupt that play and get them to look at exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it.
How do you interrupt the play?
Well, you bring it into consciousness. You bring it into their awareness through noticing the pattern. So if you explain the pattern to a person, I draw pictures when I'm talking to kids or diagrams. It's very easy to demonstrate what's going on. As soon as they can recognize a pattern, it's a little bit like, say, star signs. If somebody says to you, this is your star sign, and explains your behavior, some people will find that interesting, and they will notice that that's an aspect of the Scorpio, for example, might have a bad temper, and that's very common. I go, oh, Scorpios have bad tempers, therefore that's part of how I behave. I'm trying to draw attention to certain patterns that exist in people who feel bullied and the same patterns that exist in people who bully. And when you notice the patterns, you can discuss it and you can grow and learn from it.
I note that you are a trainer of neuro linguistic programming.
Yes.
Is this the kind of therapy that you're using when you are helping people who are experiencing or perpetrating bullying?
Absolutely. It's one of the main drivers for me creating the book was the fact I was having such success helping people, and it made me incredibly driven. The idea that you can sit with a child for 40 minutes and completely turn a story on its head, turn them around so they're looking forward to going back to school because all of a sudden it's a challenge, all of a sudden it's not about them, all of a sudden it's something that young people experience, and if they experience it and overcome it, they become a better person, a more powerful person, a more interesting person, a person who's able to get results and to move forward. Then if you can do that in a 40-minute chat or a couple of chats with a child, then the world needs to know about it. People need to know about this.
I mean, children who bully will often continue, if that's not pulled up, will often then continue that behaviour in their adult relationships, won't they?
Absolutely. All of this is perpetuated, and that's why I'm interested in the connection between domestic violence, bullying, and abused. Both spouses, men and women, are both abused, but it's a pattern. It's a pattern that plays out in children, in adults, in corporations, in world powers. Don't tell me that war isn't bullying. Like, war is bullying. It's just a bigger version of it.
With lots of ammunition behind it. So your belief is that when it comes to domestic violence, this is just another face of bullying.
Yes, I've narrowed it, in my opinion, I've narrowed it down to behaviour. So there's a certain behaviour. If you're an adult, it will show up as either abusive behaviour, someone who's drunkenly rampages or road rages or is aggressive. That person will most probably be abusive in the home anyway. So it'll show up in relationships. In children, it shows up in the playground. In governments, it shows up in their attitude towards each other and how they approach problems. And I'm very, very keen to share an idea of peaceful, nonviolent resistance, which is within the book. Now,
which gets us very nicely to the foreword, which has been written by Dr. Arun Gandhi and his grandson of Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes, I know.
So tell me about this. Woo, how did that come about?
Well, it's a bit ironic. Call me naive, but I wrote the entire book without checking up if there were any Gandhis actually doing anything in the world. And a friend of mine contacted me and said, in the States, and said, Dr. Arun Gandhi is here doing a book signing. He's written a book. And I said, that's lovely. I said, does he have anything, what does he have to do with my book? And she put Gandhi in capital letters. And I just started laughing to myself. So I emailed him and said, I'm coming towards the end of writing a book where I'm very, very aligned with the principles of your grandfather, and I feel it's very important to share the non-violent resistance method of coping with bullying and dominance. Would you be interested in writing a foreword for me? And he emailed me back within half an hour and said, send it through.
In your book, that's amazing.
Yes, I nearly fell on the floor, to be honest.
I bet you did. That's incredible. There's so much more that we could talk about there, and unfortunately we've got just a limited window of opportunity this morning. If people were to get their hands on a copy of your book, what kind of a process do you lead them through? Is it possible for instance, to use your book as a tool to work with your own child who might be experiencing bullying?
Definitely. That's why I've written it. I've written it because I knew that one person in the world can't do enough. So if I write a book and I can at least give it, share it, sell it, spread it around the world, and people can take it and work with their own kids or their partner or their friend. Teenagers can work with it. If they can use this as a tool, then I will be delighted. But yes, that's the intention behind the book. It's filled with tools and techniques, processes, ideas, understandings. I pick every single aspect of bullying apart as best I can. I've shared every single thing I could possibly think of, including all the great quotes from the masters that have gone through time to show us that this method works, that this attitude works. It's a change in attitude more than anything.
And what would you say the attitude needs to shift to? If somebody's being bullied, for instance, how does their attitude need to change?
They need to stop focusing on the bully for a start, because you can't climb a mountain if it's not there. So these people need to show up, and they will show up in your life until you've figured out how to deal with them. And you need to focus on how you look at yourself. If somebody calls you an idiot and you believe it, you're in big trouble. But if someone calls you an idiot and you don't, it sort of becomes irrelevant. And that's the only way you can manage bullying long term, is shifting how you perceive the behaviour of others, and whether you invest in it and identify with it, or whether you move into your own centre and create a very strong idea of who you are and what you're here for.
So Karen, if people are interested in getting their hands on your book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, at the moment they go to my website, they can buy it, actually. It's www.
From bully to brilliant?
Yes.
.com.
Yes.
Karen Clarke, really interesting getting your perspective on this age-old problem. I hope it gives people the resources and strength that they need to, if they're experiencing this issue in their own lives or that of their children. And thank you for coming in and telling us about your book.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me.